Hey everyone, it's great to be with you. Welcome. It's a spring day, almost, depending where you are, I guess, whether you're enjoying spring or not. Got to get our mic all hooked up here. Aren't quite ready. There we go. All right, and that's a little loud, it looks like, so we're going to adjust that down a bit. There we go. So no, there we go. All right, so today on the Simple Plan Live, we are going to talk about working with a financial advisor. Do you need one? And what's it like to work with one? This is a big question these days. People are often wondering whether they want to work with an advisor. And let me preface this all by saying it's certainly not essential. It's absolutely possible to do this all for yourself. There's tools out there, lots of great education on how to do things, all that good stuff. But it's not a simple thing to do. So therefore, you need to dedicate a lot of time. We're going to talk about that a bit. So first, I want to thank our sponsor, which is the Simple Plan community. We really invite you to join with us because, we got a lot of good stuff going on in there. And people are sharing their stories. We're helping. We're sharing tools. We want to know how we can help you on your journey. And so if you want a community where you can share with like-minded people who are on the same journey, trying to make the most of their finances, and boy, is that ever a crazy time right now with all the market volatility driven by geopolitical events, inflation running away. I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. Also, price of gasoline and oil. It's a very challenging time. And so it's great to have a community of people to walk with who are looking to do all the same things you're trying to do. That is to live with some financial peace of mind, make the most of your money, and care for your loved ones and make good plans for the future. So we invite you to join the Simple Plan community. That's at facebook.com/groups/Simple Plan community. Join us there. We'd love to have you. So today, as I said, we're going to talk about financial advisors, whether they're a good idea or maybe they're not a good idea. How do I get one? How do I find one? That kind of thing. I have a couple of special tools that we're going to share with you today. So stick with us. This is going to be interesting. So I want to start by talking a little bit about what's going on around us right now. We have some interesting times going on. So let me show you. Where are we here? All right. Let's bring up that window. I want to show you a list because a lot of people are fearful right now about their finances. I've had so many conversations in the last few weeks with people who are wondering what they should do with their money. Really started out somewhat with the Canadian government and the Emergencies Act, but it's also morphed over into what's going on in Ukraine and those terrible events over there right now, and all the uncertainty that brings. And of course, the stuff that we see at home that's a part of that, that's inflation, price of gasoline. Inflation, by the way, information just came out today. The US numbers came out, I believe, for February, that showed inflation running at well over 7% in the United States. That is a very big and alarming number. Now, there's a bunch of factors going into that. That includes certainly the price of oil now, though that's not having a real knock-on effect. It's had an immediate effect at the gasoline pumps, but we are definitely going to see price increases because of that. I know you'll recall probably a few years ago when there were all sorts of surcharges being added to things, fuel surcharges being added by all sorts of service providers. It comes down to this: everything is either made with oil or moved by oil. There's nothing that there literally is nothing that doesn't involve oil in terms of consumption. So obviously everything material that is transported using fossil fuels. And so if the price of oil goes up, the price of that transportation goes up. Even more significantly, oil in some form is a major ingredient in so many things. So for example, let's imagine we thought, well, wait a minute, what if I'm just buying a virtual item? Well, let's say you're watching our broadcast here. Well, that's got nothing to do with oil. It's free, and yet it does. All the equipment, whatever piece of equipment you're watching this on, whether it's a smartphone or a computer, many of the components of that device are made with an oil-derived product. Plastics are all oil-derived, or most of them are. Of course, there's lots of energy powering all this as well. And even though I live in a part of the world where oil doesn't play a major part in energy development. The energy that we have here, and by energy I mean primarily electricity, is hydroelectric generated, which that's great. It's in some ways cleaner, for sure. But of course, you take out major areas of the environment when you're building hydroelectric facilities. So every energy source has its issues. Everything is, for this time being, everything is either moved by or made with oil. And so oil has jumped up enormously in price. I just came from Vancouver earlier this week, where oil prices reached as high as $2.12 a liter. That's the highest price in North America, in Vancouver there. And with this inflation in the US, we've seen Canadian inflation follow along. It lags a bit, and it's not quite as over the top as the US numbers, but Canadian inflation is definitely running ahead of 5% right now. And that is having an effect on everything. We're seeing it in grocery stores, we're seeing it in restaurants. And the things that are affecting that are, yes, the price of oil because of the war in Ukraine and the boycott of Russia, but also the supply chain, the difficulty in getting goods or components that are used to create the things that we're consuming, whether it's produce in restaurants and grocery stores, whether it's parts made overseas in Asia. All of those are costing more because the supply chains are grinding hard. They're not working well. They're not that well lubricated right now. So all these things are adding to costs. We're seeing that 5% inflation. You're certainly seeing it in the grocery store. We've certainly noticed it in our part of the world in restaurants. Prices have gone up everywhere. And I believe we're going to continue to see that. So I thought one of the best ways to talk about the value of financial advisors is actually just be one today. As I said, you can do this all yourself. There's nothing stopping you. It's really a matter of whether you're going to have all the necessary information to do it. I would advise you do not believe the oversimplified tools that are out there that make it seem as if you can download a phone app, spend 10 minutes on it, and boom, you've made an investment plan and you're off to the races. That is not the case. There are many complexities you need to be considering, especially when it comes to taxation and long-range planning. And those can have very profound effects. So let me share a table here. So I'm getting many calls and inquiries right now about should we be making changes to our financial strategies, our investing strategies. Also, what am I going to do about government seizing and freezing funds and that kind of thing? So this is a list that I'm showing you, and I know the print is small on your screen there, but it's a list of, what do they call it here? Volatile events throughout modern history. And this goes back to the 1929 stock market crash, which ushered in the Depression. And so the stock market crash happened in 1929, and people tend to look at large events and think that, oh, we've got this big thing going on, it's going to have a profound effect. Well, this lets you recognize that there's pretty much one of those every year. In fact, I think they have one for every year here from 1929 through to, where do they take it through? 2020, which the last one on that they have in 2020 is the COVID-19 pandemic. And I would add to that now, of course, the kind of cultural divisiveness that's going on that is partly about the pandemic, but it's about other things as well. I would certainly add the inflation we're experiencing. And now, of course, we add the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So going back, we've got the stock market crash, we've got the Depression, a bit of a gap there. We've got the Spanish Civil War in 1935, recession in 1937, World War II starts in 1939. You get the idea. France falls 1940, the Nazis have really overrun Europe. 1941, Pearl Harbor's bombed, the United States drawn in. Price controls, all sorts of economic shakeup and upheaval for the war effort globally. Lots of shortages. There was rationing. And then there was post-war recession was predicted. Of course, the Cold War ran and began in 1947. The United States exploded nuclear weapons in 1945, then the Soviet Union did it in 1949. Korean War begins. It goes on and on and on. 1987, an era that actually has some somewhat concerning parallels to our recent or our current moment. There was an energy crisis in 1973 that was precipitated by the OPEC nations really kind of collaborating on the price of oil. And they really stuck it to the West and increased the price of oil dramatically. And there were big lineups at the gas stations back then. There was a scarcity was the bigger problem, not just the price. It did go up, but there was a scarcity. And that really led into inflation in the mid-70s, which led to big hikes in interest rates starting in 1978. 1980, interest rates were at an all-time high. By the way, mortgage rates in that period, in the early 1980s, were running up over 20% per year. So if you can imagine, let's say you've bought a house in Vancouver or Toronto or some similar area, and you have a $500,000 mortgage on it. Well, if you can imagine at 20% interest rates, that means the interest costs alone every year would be running you about $8,500 per month. That's without paying down any principal. And so a lot of people came from, they were paying probably 7% interest that they had had on their mortgage prior, 7 or 8. And when their renewal time came, they were having to renew at 20, and they just could not afford to make those payments. So they subsequently lost their houses because they couldn't renew. They could not renew their mortgage because their mortgage payments were going from, I'll put it in today's dollars, the equivalent today, they would have been going from like $2,000 a month mortgage payments to $9,000 a month mortgage payments. And they just couldn't possibly afford that. So we go on, 1987, there was what was called Black Monday, the biggest single market decline in history, October 19th. We get all sorts of other things. We get the Persian Gulf War, the Desert Storm. We got riots in Los Angeles in 1992, Oklahoma City bombing 1995, 9/11, of course, all the Y2K paranoia and the internet stock crash in 1999 and 2000. Then the subprime mortgage crisis in 2007 that led to the great recession of 2008. The market didn't bottom out until March of 2009 on that. And of course, we've had all sorts of issues go on since then. Problems in Syria, the North Korea regularly rattling their cage, etc., etc., etc. And that brings us up to today. So we're never at a shortage for crisis. So why am I going on and on about all these crises? Well, because let's look at how the stock market has performed. So this is a chart that shows how the market has performed. The green is positive, the red is negative, in every calendar year since 1929. And so we can see in 1929, it was actually up 40%, close to 40%, before it really hit the skids. Actually, that's 1928. It was up nearly 40%. Then it went down in 1929, 1930, and really went down. But then again, you see it jumping up. And so we have far more years in which it's positive than in which it's negative. And so what has the result of that been? Let's take a look at that. Let's go to our other tool. All right, so we have here the calculator. Now this is just for the US market, but it applies. This is a calculator that shows the return over a long period of time for the S&P 500, the US stock index. Now the S&P 500 is a construct that's more modern, so they still use stock market numbers from the US. Going all the way back, we can check all the way back to 1871. So from 1871 to 2022, this is the number we want, this annualized S&P 500 return where the dividends are reinvested. So that's you investing your money in the market and it just rides. That has averaged 9.27% rate of return year over year since 1871. So if you want history, this is history. This is 151 years of performance, 9.27%, amidst all those ups and downs, all those crises, all those problems. Let's look at it since 1929, because those are the crises we were talking about. All right, calculate that. 9.718. All right, so that's even better. We've done 9.7% since 1929. All right, let's look at something more current. Let's look at what it's been like since just in this century. So since the year 2000. Calculate that. Well, it's been a little lower because we had, honestly, the US market was a little sluggish in the early 2000s and then we had the big downturn. So in that period, it's only averaged almost 7.4%. And if we go for the last 10 years, because we've been on a pretty big tear, it's been 14.4% over those 10 years. Now, we've been living through a global pandemic that really we started getting wind of in January of 2020. What do you think? How do you think we've done since January of 2020? A lot of people are thinking that, well, of course, it mustn't have been that great. But if you've been invested, here's what we've done since 2020, since January 2020. 18.7%. Now, I would have predicted that with the COVID crisis, there's going to be all sorts of upheaval, uncertainty, and downturn. I'd have been completely wrong. Now, there was a big downturn. That happened from March, let's call it May 2020. How did we do in that period? 81. That means it was actually down 20%. If we go April, it might even be worse. There you go. The market, the US market, dropped 34% in March and April. So in just about 6 weeks, it dropped 34% and came all the way back. It was a colossal drop, and it would have been easy to panic at that point. But if you didn't panic, if you just said, well, this stuff happens, it's going to happen some more, and left it in, then, oh, okay. So we'll go February just to make the tool happy. So there, February 2020 to February 2022, 19.5. So my advice, and yes, we've been a little shaky. Let's look at that since, let's go November 2021. We've been experiencing not a great little period here. November 2021 till now, the S&P 500 is down almost 10%. Most of that's pretty recent, I think. But yeah, it's been a bit of a downturn, which we expect. Okay, now we're getting too short a period to actually correctly, because we're less than a year. So this calculator doesn't work for that. So we'll go back to our 2020. To 2022. Oh, we have a problem. Let me just reload the calculator. It seems to have gotten a little messed up here. There we go. Yeah, okay, so we've done 19% year over year the last 2 years. So all of this to say, don't panic. And as I say, this is part of why you have an advisor, because an advisor understands all this stuff if they're good. Now, I'll talk about this for a bit. There's a lot of advisors that aren't good. So you need to have a good advisor, not a mediocre advisor. So what does an advisor bring to the table? Well, let's have a look. A lot of this comes out of study that was a major study that was done a number of years ago to quantify whether it's worthwhile to have an advisor or not. So here are the findings from that. It was done by the IFIC, the Investment Funds Institute of Canada, an oversight body for financial advisors. And their report found that those who get advice, that advice can have a significant positive impact on wealth accumulation or growing your money and being ready for retirement. It gives you a greater savings discipline, which is essential, greater trust, confidence, and satisfaction and level of understanding that lead to better results when you're getting sound financial advice. All right, that sounds nice. But how does that play out? Well, studies have shown that people who receive financial advice accumulate significantly more financial wealth, are better protected, and better prepared for retirement and unexpected events than people who did not receive advice. And so when it says Advocus 2013, that's an analysis from that report. Finally, let's look at some numbers. So the growth in assets over time of households that received advice compared to those that did not. So this is households that are getting advice versus households that are not getting advice. And let's look at the effect. So in the 4 to 6 year window here, in the 4 to 6 year window, if like being with an advisor 4 to 6 years, people are doing about 1.5 times better. So that is if someone had grown their wealth in 4 to 6 years by 100%, the person without an advisor, the person with an advisor on average was getting 150%. So doing 1.5 times the amount. Now, as the windows get larger, so in the 7 to 14 year time range of working with an advisor, it actually doubles your results. We see that here. And then finally, Over the longer term, so 14 years and more, you get 2.73 times the results. So you put in X amount of money, you're going to grow your money 2.5 times as much. So where someone without advice might have grown their money by $100,000, you'd have grown yours by $250,000. This is all documented in a study. It's not just an opinion. It's actual measured results. Or as we're so glibly fond of saying these days, this is what the science says. Now, working with an advisor is not necessarily the right answer, in that you have to work with the right advisor. And the right advisor is going to have a number of attributes that's going to help to fit you and what you're doing. I talked last week about how most people, even though they think they may have a financial plan of some kind, really don't. They have nothing documented that's reviewed regularly, and then where the assumptions are tested against the results. And that's just as true for people working with an advisor as it is for those without an advisor. And that is very disturbing. That's a terrible blight on the financial advice industry. But you don't have to put up with that. The answer for you is make sure you're working with an advisor who fits what you want and who is able and who practices by working from a plan and provides you with a plan and then follows up on that plan and reviews that plan. So how can you achieve this? Well, you have to assert yourself. You have to take some control and demand that kind of thing. So if you're not getting that kind of service, if you've got an advisor now, the thing that we're biggest on is that you're getting value for your money from an advisor, because you're paying for an advisor. Even if they don't send you a bill, there's money getting paid to that advisor, and it's coming out of the results often of your investment growth. Now, some people have said that's a terrible way to operate. I don't agree with that. I think a lot of people in more modest situations can't really afford to pay an hourly rate for an advisor to get the advice they need. It's too expensive. And so you can find advisors like we do, where we work with people on either basis. We work with people on the basis of what we call assets under management. That is, there's a percentage paid. It's all less than 1%, somewhere between 0.6 and 0.95%, depending on how much money you have invested. And that just comes directly out of the funds, and it's paid by the fund companies. And what that means is you can then get the service, the full service. Again, this is how I'm just describing how we work. All advice channels work differently, but this is how we work, where we will take anyone who wants to start out and get control of their finances and save systematically in order to build their financial future, and work on that assets under management basis. So if they have a small or a very modest amount of investments to start with, we'll start there and we'll work with them. We'll help them build a plan and implement that plan. Honestly, that costs us a lot more than we get paid for it in the first few years. But over time, that will become increasingly worthwhile for us in terms of getting compensated for the work that we're putting in to assist these families. Now, for people that have more money, and the threshold is probably somewhere around $250,000, for people that have more invested, we at any stage will work with people on a fee-for-service basis, but it really doesn't make sense financially for people until they get about $250,000 invested. This is why you hear so many advisors who say you need to have a minimum of $100,000 or $250,000 or $500,000 or $1 million to invest with their company. We don't practice that way. We think everybody should have access to advice. And so we've structured ourselves in such a way that we can provide advice to everybody in a compensation form that makes the best financial sense for them. You should always be aware of what you're getting, though. So the two things that you should be able to know very clearly in working with an advisor are, one, how much am I paying an advisor? What is the amount I'm paying? They should be able to tell you every year how much they're getting paid or how much you've paid to work with them. And secondly, you should be able to easily consider whether you're getting value for your money. Now, maybe the advisor has to help you understand what goes into some of the services they provide. But for example, if you've got $100,000 invested in a bank through some form of bank channel, and they're taking 1% in fees annually, which is very typical, that means you're paying them $1,000 just for the advice and the transactions. Now, if all you're doing is putting $500 a month into your RSP and you never meet with anybody or hear from anybody with the bank after the first visit, what are you paying that $1,000 for? It's cash in their pocket, but they're bringing no value to you. So that's a terrible setup. And there are many like that. There are many advisors who play the set it and forget it game. The number one thing I hear from people who come to work with us is that the advisors that they were working with before, they could never get hold of them and never heard from them. And so they were very frustrated. If you can't even get hold of the person that you need to talk to, or if it's just some clerk over a counter or in a call center and it's always somebody different, then you're quite possibly paying a fair bit of money, which you may not see until you ask the question, what am I paying? But you're paying money and not getting much. Now, if they can't even answer the question of how much you paid in fees last year, then there's a problem. And you should start looking for another advisor. So when I say it's worthwhile to work for an advisor, it's well worthwhile to work with an advisor because you can get these better results that you see on the screen there, and you can have that peace of mind. But you can't have it if the advisor's not capable of doing that or doesn't build themselves around doing that. So make sure you've got an advisor that's doing that for you. Now, there's a couple of things, and never be afraid to ask your advisor questions. Again, this is just our approach. I have a background in adult education, so I tend to take this approach because of my own experience. But we very much want to educate our clients so that they fully understand what we're doing together, and that they have ownership and control at the high level of what's going on. We're not making choices for them. We're helping them to make choices for themselves. And so we want them to be able to easily articulate the approach that they're following with the plan that we've helped them develop. And so we spend a lot of time educating people. I've spent many hours on the phone and online over the last month, really, with clients who are concerned, upset, understandably so, about a lot of what's going on and want to know what it means for their wealth development and whether we should be looking at making any changes. That's part of what we do. That is a big value that advisors bring to the table, is being able to interpret the times and help their clients understand and translate into the meaning for them specifically and individually within their plans and portfolios. Now, I talked last week that if you don't have a plan and you have an advisor, there's something really wrong going on there, because if an advisor hasn't given you a plan, what is it exactly they're attempting to do? And how are they measuring whether they're accomplishing it or not? And how are you able to measure whether they've accomplished it or not? All of that stuff, unfortunately, is rife in the industry, and it's very wrong, and it shouldn't be that way. So if that's the experience you're having, you need to take control and change it. The last thing that I want to say about all that is you can do this on your own. For those who really want to do it for themselves, you can do it on your own. You just need to make sure that you understand a lot of rules, especially tax rules, so that you understand if you're putting which type of an investment vehicle you're putting your money into, whether it's a tax-free savings account, RSP, or ESP, and the various choices you might make about different types of investments, how to optimize and arrange your accounts and portfolios in such a way that you pay the least amount of tax necessary. And there can be some really big, they're not necessarily, well, I'll call them mistakes. They're just ways that most people wouldn't plan if they knew better. about how things are structured from a tax point of view. Also, you have to have the, I'll call it the intestinal fortitude to look at events such as they are now, where markets are down, there's a lot of uncertainty and upheaval in the world, and be confident in the decisions that you're making at those times. And again, that's entirely possible for people who want to do it themselves. It just requires a lot of self-education and dedicating time to take care of things. Yes, it's easy to buy, it's never been easier to buy mutual funds or individual stocks, well, really anything for the individual. It's not about being able to execute the transaction. Yes, that is very simple now. It's about being able to develop and follow and monitor a plan over a very long period of time through many different stages of life, and having a financial security net set around all your money so that if something goes terribly wrong, like a health problem or a death or what have you, that you understand how your family is going to do well financially in spite of that. So have a couple of things to share with you. One is just a quick offer. You know, if you would like to get together, we'd be happy to chat with you. You can click a time that suits your schedule. Just go to go.getthesimpleplan.com/calendar-new. That's go.getthesimpleplan.com/calendar-new. And you can book a time, you book a 15-minute time slot just to talk. It's not to, we're not there to sell you anything. We'll be happy to answer your questions. We can help you understand a bit about what we do. With new people, with people new to us, the goal is always to see if there's a fit there for some way that we might help you to achieve your goals. And we're happy to have that conversation for you. There's no pressure, there's no obligation. If you decide that you felt there was some way that you might want us to assist you, we love and are honored to do that. We exist to serve families and help them build their financial futures. But if not, that's fine too. We're happy to just kind of share our information and our knowledge with you in that initial meeting, and you get to decide whether you think there's value in further conversation, and then seeing where we might go from there. The other thing that I wanted to provide you, just let me take a quick second here to see if I can find it. Oh, look, that needed to be fixed. That's what I was in the middle of fixing when we got started today. 2 minutes faster than I thought we were going to. So there's the link there for that. Okay, let me see if I can just quickly pull up this. Other page here. We have a tool that I think can help you with this question about, let's find that. Oh, come on. Computer's running slow. So we have, there we go. Huh. Having some troubles. Might not be able to pull this up for you. Oh, here we go. Let's see. Oh, that's not it. My goodness. All right, I'm going to have to find it and put it in the show notes. So I'm looking for, we have a tool that can help you, there you go, work with an advisor. No, I don't have it there. We'll put it in the show notes, or just drop us an email. You can find us at getthesimpleplan.com. That's going to get you, you'll find places there that you can, there we go, getthesimpleplan.com. Put that right over my mug there. You go there and you can send us an inquiry. We're happy to send you. We have a tool called the What to Ask an Advisor that you're meeting with. If you're looking for an advisor, then I recommend that you interview 2 or 3 advisors. Of course, you can probably do that all online now before you get started to help you and them figure out whether there's a fit. But you're going to get a much better impression of whether you feel comfortable, because this is such an important relationship. Trust has to work really well, and you have to feel really comfortable and confident. And so you want to interview a few people to see what the right fit is for you. So I'm going to dig up that advisor questionnaire. It's going to help you if you're going to do some of those interviews. You can also find it. We'll post it in the Simple Plan community. So we invite you to join the Simple Plan community, facebook.com/groups/Simple Plan community. And that's it. That's what we got for today. I hope that's been helpful. You had to see both kind of what it is about working with an advisor, and also to see some of the value that an advisor brings, especially in difficult times like this. So, you know, what I'm telling everybody right now is please remain calm. Absolutely review things. If you're uncertain and you have an advisor, call your advisor and ask him. Ask him, ask her, what's going on? Do I need to be worried? What are you thinking? And see if you're comfortable with that answer. And so that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back again next week. And next week, we're going to be talking about time is money in honor of daylight savings time switching this Sunday. We're going to look at a couple ways from a wealth building point of view, how time is money. We're going to have a couple tools for you. We're looking forward to that. And so thanks very much. Have a great week and weekend. And we'll see you again next week.